You're listening to another episode of Open Source CXO, the podcast designed to share insights on how to excel in your business using technology, regardless of the industry. Host Robert Kehoe is a self-taught software developer who has grown to the role of CEO. Renowned for his collaborations with organizations such as Stanford University, Nelnet, and Louis Vuitton, he continually seeks new challenges to conquer in the world of tech. Accompanying him is Don Blackburn, a veteran COO with over 25 years of experience in cultivating diverse relationships and driving innovation in various technical projects. Each week, they'll be sitting down with some of the nation's foremost technology leaders to develop an open source playbook, drawing from their firsthand experiences in the field. Let's talk some tech.
Today on our podcast, our guest is Nick Ide. Welcome, Nick.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Nick is with Ascend Learning. So why don't you tell the folks a little bit about Ascend Learning and your role there?
Sure, absolutely. At Ascend Learning, I'm the VP of Software Engineering for our healthcare segment. So we change lives is our mission, and as it applies to helping people prepare for professions across healthcare, fitness and wellness, safety and security. So your doctors, nurses, personal trainers, and so on. So we provide tools and solutions to help them be successful both before certification as well as after. So we want to make sure we keep those connections and keep them learning and helping them help others out in the world. Yeah.
And Ascend has been around for quite a long time. It seems to me they've been in Kansas City. It's a Kansas City-based company, right?
Yeah, and we're an umbrella company with a number of different of brands associated with it. ATI, Assessment Technologies Institute, is the large one that's been here in Kansas City, where they got started providing assessments for around nursing education. And then as that, as the company grew, then more companies, started to be added to the portfolio around health sciences, medicine, fitness and wellness, and all kind of playing in similar spaces, which then starts to create some interesting technology problems, right? Like when you're trying to solve that same problem multiple times, going through acquisition and other things. It's been an interesting ride in trying to navigate that and help us be more effective and efficient in creating those learning opportunities and scaling these platforms.
What's the makeup of your technical team look like? Skill set, location, size?
Yeah. Our headquarters is in Boston, Massachusetts, but a large part of our technology organization is actually located here in Kansas City. So we have technical resources spread across those offices, but then we've also got a mix of nearshore and offshore engineers helping support the team, as well as quality engineers as well, both onshore, offshore, nearshore. So we've got a pretty wide variety. And then on the tech stack side, we've got a little bit of everything. So cloud, on-prem, .NET, PHP, Python. And again, a lot of that comes through kind of acquired platforms and things that we have.
So when you acquire a company, do you let them stay separate or autonomous from their platform standpoint, or do you try to bring them all together?
The goal is to ultimately bring it all together as much as we possibly can. Focus on the core competencies that we have, the differentiating capabilities that we provide, and finding ways to get those integrated in, and then look for those opportunities to try to migrate the broader platforms into one. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So how big is your IT department?
Pretty large. So we have segment-focused groups. Then we have shared service groups. So these are, individuals, especially like our enterprise services team. So these are your infrastructure folks, your networking folks. They're spread across the entirety of the portfolio of platforms and services that we provide. And then we've got more platform-focused engineering teams that are working on those specific platforms. So 300, 400 folks, all in, across, once you roll the software engineers in with the network engineers and the security folks and everybody. So it's a good size organization. Yeah.
Bigger than I thought.
A lot of people to manage.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So one of the things you and I talked about in advance was culture. And it's something that I think, especially in an organization that large, has got to be a big challenge is just how do you build a culture? Well, I'll let you speak to it. So, the culture and what it means to you guys.
Yeah. I think, for me, like my journey and like in determining culture's role in a software engineer's life, it came from, as my time as a software engineer myself, of, oftentimes you just be sitting there with your headphones on, a problem gets thrown over the wall. Here, have this done by next week, right? And you sit down and you crank it out, and then the next thing would come over, which is fine, good. You can learn that way. You can, have pretty positive experiences. But it wasn't until I moved on to a different place in my career where they really invested in the culture that you just like, wow, this makes a difference. Like, I feel like better connection to why we exist as a company, why the problems that I'm solving matter to the company, and how I'm having a direct impact, and saw the way that changed my perspective and attitude on the job. And then started kind of exploring, like, well, what does that look like here? Because it seems like there's a divide oftentimes between the corporate culture and the IT culture, right? And sometimes that divide can be very intentional or divisive in some cases, right? So, man, when you get those things working together in harmony with one another, you can see some really great things happen.
So how did that manifest itself? How did you said it was a clear difference, like an aha moment? Oh man, this is huge.
Yeah.
What was it? Was it just communication?
I think the big part, the vision from the leadership and the intentionality of the leadership, where you could see their investment in this. This is not just posters on a wall, right? Like that, hey, we did it. Right. We've got culture, right? Yeah. And I think some companies take that approach, where kind of more the check the box approach, and then maybe you take a survey at the end of the year, make some adjustments, and then you don't touch it again. But seeing a company who was greatly invested in the culture and taking steps to all along the way to understand, are we mission aligned? Are we keeping the customer at the center of our discussions and conversations about what we do, what we don't do? And it just allowed us to do great things and be greatly successful in the marketplace.
Interesting.
Now, I do have a question. So so talking about building a culture, what does that actually mean? Honestly, like, are we talking about trying to just align everybody from like a company strategic perspective, or are you talking about trying to blend or trying to foster this sense of, similar personality type fits, or like what when you say building a culture, what exactly are you referring to?
I think, it does start some sense, from that strategic perspective with your mission, vision, values, right? And making sure that those are clearly articulated and understood by everyone. Mission, why are we here? What problems are we here to solve for our customers? Vision, how are we going to, get there? And then what are those core underlying values that really embody who we are as a company? One of the things that I feel like Ascend does really well is make sure that those values are upfront and understood by everyone. And it does become part of our interview, process. It also becomes part of our evaluation process, where we talk about, what are our values and how have we demonstrated those values through the work that we were responsible for in the given year. So again, it has to be kind of part of that conversation. So culture then becomes, when we see opportunities come through, new project, new challenges, new people forming around a problem, what is the situation? How do we look at ways to embrace this change, which is one of Ascend's, core values, to be courageous, to be inclusive, and to be passionate, and making sure that everyone is coming in kind of with that mindset. And it creates a kind of, kind of an internal accountability, right, to the group, because everyone's oriented to that same mission, and everyone's bought into the culture that we're trying to create there. And then when we drift, we know when we're off center, and then we as a team can come around it together and kind of make sure that, hey, we remain kind of focused on the task, and we live out these values no matter what the circumstances and the challenges we're going through.
Then do you find the teammates will kind of coach one another?
Absolutely.
In that kind of an,
yeah.
That's the whole idea, right? Is
Right.
to kind of let the team manage itself versus having one head that's
right. I mean, from an agile perspective, or at kind of our more generalized agile goal for every team, is to be that self-directed, high-performing, customer-centric team. But I don't know that that's enough, right? That there's got to be really something more meaningful kind of behind the characteristics and the attributes of the team to help them be successful in that goal. So when I think about culture, it really is kind of help laying the groundwork and the foundation to it, for those teams to be successful.
But it's got to be more than that too. Though, as a leader, don't you have to really get to know your people
Oh, absolutely.
really well and understand what their challenges are individually?
Yeah. And then you could probably have another podcast just on performance reviews and evaluations and professional development and how that goes into it, because there isn't a kind of one size fits all approach to kind of how that's implemented, or what does culture mean can differ from one person to the next, and to really have the biggest impact possible requires having those intimate discussions, meeting with team members, understanding what's resonating, what's not, what do we understand about the customers that we serve, the problems that we're solving in support of our customers, and dealing with that, because I think that really helps clear the way in understanding how that person and individual skills can have the biggest impact possible. Where the opportunities are with respect to the work that's going on in the business now to challenge and extend and grow the individual, and then also to further promote those opportunities to demonstrate the values and the culture, right, that that we value highly within the company.
Sure.
So kind of based on what you said, so it seems to be sort of a misconception when we talk about culture and a lot of things that you see on social media and this and that, where, I mean, you just said it, where, or what, it's your job to get to know them, well, what if you don't get along with them, right? We're almost seemingly talking about culture in a perspective where it's not necessarily about personality or your relationship with the person, but just, all coming together for the same goal. Yeah. And I see, it feels like there's a huge misconception that culture means to people like, oh, I've got to like this person, or we've got to get along in order to accomplish the same things.
Like it's a little clique.
Yeah, like we have to hire people who are similar to us in order to, but that's not technically what it is we're discussing.
And not possible, I wouldn't think.
Not on a scale, not any scalable sense, at least.
Yeah, right. And I think we know, engineers can be very opinionated, and but I think in good ways, because I think that those opinions come from experiences that that have obviously come with successes, and we want those to come through and be voiced, right? And again, the culture helps teams then navigate healthy conflict, right, to produce the best solution possible. Because what we don't want is conformity in the way of just the first solution that comes out is the one we accept, because we're afraid to engage in any kind of healthy conflict.
How do you help that? How do you allow people to feel comfortable sharing those sorts of things, or coming up with a new idea that might go a little bit against whatever kind of grain that there is? How do you kind of foster that sort of comfortability to allow people that freedom to voice their opinions and concerns?
Right. A lot of it is, we spend a lot of time as a leadership team with my peers, the leaders that work under me, talking about psychological safety, and how we exhibit and promote and develop that within our regular cadence of discussions, whether it's in a refinement meeting or an architecture review or these types of discussions, because there are ways to have constructive conflict kind of within those discussions. And as leaders especially, we have to be mindful that when we observe someone who's probably being more of the bull in the china shop, rather than being someone who sees the potential in a question or a solution, and how do you tap into that to then kind of enhance it or evolve it into its best version. And those are skills, right? I mean, I didn't learn any of that in college, right? These are things that I had to learn through a number of different interactions and experiences with other software engineers.
Failures, I'd imagine.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so one of the biggest failures in my career in this regard is where what had been demonstrated to me in my early engineering career was it was about ideas winning over another idea, right? So whenever I came into a meeting to talk about a potential solution for one of the problems we've been given, then it was about, all right, I've got all the details, I got all my designs, I understand how I'm going to knock this out of the ballpark, and everybody else's design is going to look, horrible, and compared to mine. But that's the wrong way to be approaching it, right? And what I would see is then in these what were deemed to be collaborative conversation was being shut down, right? And whether it was me or the other engineers participating in the conversation, it wasn't healthy. And I could see the effect that it was having on my team members. And I was talking to one of my mentors at the time about this situation, and he had directed me towards this concept of like sandpaper people that you don't necessarily get along with, right? But you work with. Right. And how it's important to turn those relationships into as productive as they can possibly be in spite of the differences that exist between you and the other person. And that really kind of opened my awareness to just how these interactions were going on with my peers, and how unhealthy it was for the team, that we were kind of operating in this way, because I could see the voices starting to just quiet down. And people weren't speaking up. Yeah. Had a good conversation with my peer about, hey, I'm really sorry about the way I've handled these discussions. Like you've got some really great ideas, and my intent is not to, lose those experiences and those contributions that you're bringing to the discussion. Like, please keep your voice, coming forward. I'm going to support you, and I'm going to change the way I'm going to behave to further kind of improve this situation, because the fact is we do all have differences. We all come from different places. We're going to have disagreements, but we've got to be able to ultimately get to the best solution.
Right. Don't make it a competition
where
somebody's going to lose. Because after you lose a couple of times, you want to quit, right?
And the nature of developer is problem solving. So like, especially in tech, that's why this whole podcast is tech centric. It's just and you were just talking about it, but team versus corporate. It's just tech is such a different animal. There's 1,000 ways to skin the cat. Hearing somebody else's ideas, if they constantly shut down, you almost take it personally. So I totally kind of, how do you, I guess then, through the hiring process, is there any specific qualities, I guess, you would look for? Are you open to people who are, going to how much do you want them to be open, about ideas and stuff during that whole interview process as compared to, I guess, how does all that go for you guys?
Yeah. Well, like I said, values are a part of that too. Like, so we come in, we want to be able to ask questions that are very kind of value centric, and making sure that comes forward, that we can find people who don't run away from problems, but can run it, kind of run into the fire, so to speak, so that we can help, tackle the biggest challenges that might be coming our way. So we definitely want to see those ideas and thoughts and patterns kind of emerge through the interview process, so that we can find, candidates that we feel like will, exemplify those values at the highest levels. But we also do want to see examples of times. So like, tell me about a time where things, where things didn't go so well, or there was an idea you were trying to get across that you were passionate about, but you weren't getting the audience. Did you just hit the barrier, then walk away and say, hey, I tried, right? And give up? Or did you look for alternative avenues and opportunities to be able to, maybe you didn't get all the way to your destination, but you could start making incremental progress to, push forward the vision that you have? Because as especially as young software engineers, it's hard to kind of carve out that, because you've got senior engineers and architects and other people, at the table, and we want people to kind of have that voice. So even when we're looking at, college grads, we want to see how they've dealt with.
So you even looked for it at that level, though.
Oh yeah, okay. Absolutely.
And you feel like that's, I guess my point is, like, putting too many chefs in the kitchen can kind of be, a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. It's having too many ideas or too many of this. It's like, how do you settle on one? So at some point, you would almost have to say, all right, you know what? Yes, we're open to ideas and all this other stuff, but ultimately you have to choose a path, and everybody's going to have to follow that path. So that means somebody's going to win out, while other people, you know, their ideas may not. So it's interesting. I mean, I know you guys look for that quality, but balancing that sounds like sort of a challenge.
Yeah, and it can be, and a lot of that is, you know, time is limited, it's finite, right? So we've got to be able to time box things, get to the right solution, you know, with the time that we've been given, and also to remain agile and open-minded and not be closed off, that once these decisions are made, right, you know, the path is always filled with bumps, and that the team can continue to come together, understand the challenges, and evolve that solution as it's being developed or implemented. And but I'd say it does take managers, you know, my engineering managers especially, kind of to help navigate those discussions, right? Because we can talk about problems till we're blue in the face, and to ultimately kind of make those decisions, or maybe set certain topics aside and say, hey, what we're talking about here, you know, is a nice kind of aside, or maybe it's a secondary issue that we need to kind of debate or go into at a different time. But right now we need to stay focused on here. So facilitation then kind of becomes a big part of the discussion. This is kind of another one of these skills, you know, navigating conflict, as we just talked about, but then facilitation is another one. So when you are bringing, you know, high value, high priced, very intelligent individuals into a room to solve a problem, is you've got to have someone kind of at the center of that discussion to help keep it focused on the right problems, keep them driving towards the solution.
Who does that for you guys in these conversations?
Yeah. Oftentimes it's an engineering manager.
Okay.
Can be myself, or maybe one of my directors coming in to help navigate that.
And do you guys typically have those discussions as a group? Or to, like, let's say you're making a decision about architectural this or that, and you need to decide which way you want to go, or somebody wants to do this new thing. Are these conversations you guys have as a group, or do you kind of just take everybody's feedback and go back to the drawing board and kind of figure out what it is you want to do?
Yeah. Well, initially there's a kind of an early collaboration that happens between our architects and our team leads. They'll come together and they'll discuss, you know, here's what we're trying to do. They'll gather information, because the team leads are going to have a lot more intimate knowledge about the platforms and the systems themselves that the architects.
But the developers themselves aren't usually.
Yeah, well, and a team lead is a developer kind of within the team. Yeah,
But manages it. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not like you're finding 30 developers, you know.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then once the solution or the architecture is kind of pulled together in a draft form, then more people come to the table to kind of kick the tires and like poke at it, and then it's refined a little bit further from that point.
So
I have 1,000 questions just on that, but that'll deviate us completely from the topic.
Any one of those, any one of those things could be a whole podcast. From a hiring perspective, though, when you're talking about culture and you're bringing new people into this culture, I'm curious, because I think it differs by hiring manager and leader as to what value they put on the technical skills versus what value to put on soft skills and things like that. In your culture, is it 50-50? You know, I'll take a marginal developer from a skills perspective or a knowledge perspective if I think they're going to fit in really well and be a productive member of the team, or vice versa. You know, this guy's brilliant. He's the top 5% that I've ever talked to technically.
But he's going to ruffle some feathers.
Yeah, he's going to ruffle feathers, but I'm going to take a chance because he's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a really tough question. But at the end of the day, you know, this is why you build cultures, is like it really has to kind of, it has to apply to everybody, right? And then when you start making exceptions, and then that's kind of where you see that toxicity permeate. And it doesn't, the toxic nature of culture doesn't have to be systemic. Just the introduction of a single person who, is just continually being rude, unhelpful, right? You know, I've had software engineers who like to hoard, information and like stuff, and then they're not supporting their peers and helping them be successful. And then
this job security, though, man.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
It is, right.
And how counterintuitive that mindset is, but the effect that has on the team is tangible, right? And it can come on in slowly over time to the point that people don't even realize the effect that it's having. So going back to the interview culture, the impact on culture on the interviewing process is just that you have to make sure that, again, that you have to try to your best to get at that. Hey, are they kind of that cultural fit first, and then do they meet kind of the criteria of the job? Because if we do go too far into, because we've done it before, man, there's in my career where you just have that technical, superstar, right? But, how long can you, how do you work with that individual to have them have the biggest impact possible, but not degrade, the team culture identity that you're trying to build, right?
Well, then the other balancing act, I would think, is from a interviewing perspective. You want the team involved, right? I'm sure you kind of interview for culture. You probably have your team leads interview for tech, and so forth. But you can't draw that out. You see all over social media, especially LinkedIn nowadays. Oh, I went through 8 interviews and then they selected somebody else, right? Or, all these people complaining about how many steps there are to an interview process. Yeah, you have to keep it somewhat short these days, don't you?
Yeah, we've cut back, and it was kind of more drawn out. You had different people. You wanted to kind of everyone at the table to kind of have their say and their input, on the hiring process. And I think for candidates too, just to be mindful of their time and everything, you do have to strike the balance. And so, coming into the interview with a clear game plan, on who's talking about what information are we trying to understand from the candidate in this discussion. Are you focusing on the technical? Are you focusing on the cultural? If you're focusing on cultural, which aspects? Because 7 values is a lot to kind of focus on in a 45-minute to an hour phone call. So we may have to divide and conquer there. So being very intentional and prepared for those discussions kind of helps us kind of strike a little bit more balance rather than just continuing to throw people into the process. And because again, you do have to be mindful of the candidates, because I've been on the receiving end of the, like the 13 interview,
and coding samples and everything else.
And that's not a great first impression.
No, for sure. There's one topic to kind of pivot a little bit that I really wanted to get to, and you and I talked about a little bit over coffee, was the whole remote versus hybrid versus in office. It seems to be kind of a powder keg of a topic nowadays. And it comes and goes is the funny thing to me. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit, so you see, the feed will go up and down as to, sometimes it's more in the forefront than other times, but it's always there. Like there's a certain percentage of the workforce that's just adamant remote. It seems like your organization's kind of a mix, right?
There's a follow-up question real quick. How controversial do you want to get?
Because people will start throwing things at the monitor when they're watching this.
And it in some sense it depends on the individual. In terms, every individual has to make the decision of what's best for them in terms of their family situation, their needs, their desires, and prioritize those when they're making that decision.
Their personality types, man. I'm telling you, not everybody's cut out to do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't even know if I am. That's too much going on at home anyway.
Well, that's where I've been from the very beginning. Is I think there's people I think it's a skill set. I think people are really good at it, and then you got other people that are really bad at it. I'm not good at it, and I freely admit it. Right? I can do it every once in a while, but I'd much rather be in the office. I'm more productive. So
that's because you get to see me.
Yeah.
In spite of that, I'm still unproductive.
But to kind of poke at the word that you just used is productivity. What we hear a lot of times people say, it's like I'm more productive at home versus the office or vice versa. But what is productivity? Like from that sense, are you busy? Like, are you at your computer more? Are you really able to engage in the problems of the day in the most meanful way, in the best way that you possibly can, right? And I think that's a little harder to track and monitor from a leadership perspective, because you can track, time at the computer or response times on, Teams messages or whatever that you would want to do, which is horrible, by the way. But
micromanaging,
right, exactly. But again, it does kind of frame things up, though. It's like we want productivity, but what we do is we want engagement at the highest level. And so how do you do that? And I think there are limits to, while the tooling for collaboration has improved greatly since the pandemic, as we were all struggling through Zooms and Teams rapid evolution. So you never knew what new feature was going to either be there or be broken, on a daily basis. That it has greatly improved the situation, but we still see that there's gaps, right? That especially when dealing with large, complicated enterprise problems, how do you bring people around that in a virtual setting and to get the best solution? Right. And what you don't want to do is fall into this trial and error trap where we're just doing tasks, architecture, do architect one, do this task, hand it over to this team. Hey, team one, implement this. Oh, found a problem, throw it back over, right? But no one's ever really coming together to talk about, the problem, understanding kind of the nuances and the details, sharing relevant information, important information to help guide those solutions. We're just kind of working within the agile structures in the name of calling it agile, right? And it's like, we're just iterating and figuring out. But it's just, I think it's masking an underlying problem. It's like, well, if we really started with the end in mind and really brought everyone to the table to talk about this and used that consolidation of knowledge and experience, we could probably arrive at a better place and set our teams up for success more effectively than what we do today. And so we've been trying to create more opportunities. We're only in the office 1 day a week. That's kind of our hybrid schedule. We have everyone within our technology department in on Wednesdays, and what we've seen is teams more effectively in those moments being able to, hey, grab a room. We've got this new feature that we need to work on. Let's talk with let's pull our architect in, pull them in, and in the case that they might be in Burlington, we have Surface hubs and things in the office, and get them on the video call, and we can start kind of virtual whiteboarding together. But those moments and those opportunities are really difficult to recreate in the same way when everyone's virtual. So really trying to make every moment count while still giving employees a lot of flexibility in terms of we've always had kind of a life happens policy at Ascend, and in making sure that we can accommodate and facilitate the needs of our team members. But we do also want to create more opportunities on the other side where we get them excited about coming together to solve problems, talk about the issues that are affecting an important project that we're working on, and to want to have that face time, right? So that they see it as a value add in and of itself, not a detractor, which I think that when you get into the hot button aspect is like, why do I have to be in the office, right? And I value my time at home, and we all do, right? But it's been a difficult one to navigate, and one that we continue to kind of evolve. No one's, I think, done. At least our journey is not done in this regard, and listening to the employees and making sure that we take that feedback into consideration as we make future changes. And evolutions.
So right now it's just 1 day, Wednesday. Everybody's in.
Yep.
Okay.
And then.
But
other people come in, people do come in on other days, and and that's great, right? And then that's what we want to be able to see, is that again they see the opportunity themselves and say, hey, we don't wait till the next Wednesday. Like, hey, let's plan on coming in tomorrow and let's hash this problem out together, right? And that's and that type of thing is happening kind of more and more, and that's what we're trying to kind of encourage and develop within the team.
So do your managers and senior leadership come in a little more often, or is it still just same kind of schedule?
2 to 3 days a week usually. And again, trying to there's a lot of collaboration within the leadership teams as well, and so it's a lot easier to have those face-to-face discussions with one another rather than out of the office. So I'm usually in the office 2 to 3 times a week.
Do you find it's helpful? Do you ever pull folks in, suggest they come in if someone's struggling with the whole remote thing, not being as productive as you'd like, or not being as responsive as you'd like? Do you pull those in? Like, hey, why don't you come in 3 days this week? And
can't say that I've had that experience.
Do that? Okay.
No. again, try to meet every individual where they're at, with their personal situations, and understand kind of what's going on first before, taking steps like that. And again, everyone's life situation is different, but with hybrid, again, when it comes down to making it high value time, we don't just want you to do the same thing that you were doing at home in the office. When you're in the office, what we want to do is create the most collaborative kind of
that makes
focus,
sense.
Experience.
At home, get your work done. The office, collaborate.
Yeah.
But how do you measure like the success, and how do you measure that performance? So let's say they're
What
back
is
at home.
productive?
Yeah, what technically is productive? And honestly, you guys have a global team, is what it seems like. So, from my experience, productivity levels are vastly different between various So it really just depends. How do you guys measure that, and what is productive to you guys?
Yeah. Philosophically, it all kind of starts with a say-do, of do what you say you're going to do. And, obviously that's something that Agile tracks out of the gate. But what say-do doesn't give you, especially at the sprint level, is did I meet the customer's needs, right? All it's proven is that you did work that you said that you would do. Yeah. But how did I know that it was the most important work? Did you complete the task or the objective that you set out to do? So we've continued to look at new metrics and ways of determining business value contribution, like how much impact are our teams actually having on the business. There are very clear deliverables that we need to meet for revenue purposes, for efficiency purposes, or whatever that is, and we want to make sure that our teams are oriented on that rather than just we plan this sprint, complete this sprint, right? Like there's no success until the objective is met. So how do we make sure that those objectives are brought forward and they're really the center of the conversation? And so then the say-do really becomes our commitment to the customer rather than to our product owner or whoever's, kind of made the request of the team. So it's a bit of a shift. I think that this is kind of the trap that metrics can put you in, or even that Agile can put you in. Is, hey, if I'm just doing the next prioritized thing, that I'm winning, I'm successful, right? But if we're not shipping software, if we're not meeting the customer's needs, then we haven't. Yeah.
Well, if it means anything, I give you an A+ today. You did fantastic.
Well, I need a lot of encouragement, to be able to get through my day. So I do appreciate that.